our quote for today, and it goes like this: "Our fondness for the stars has touched our souls. We all share the feeling of discovery, whether the object we have found is new to all or new only to us. The thrill penetrates our being as we try to describe through drawings, photographs, or words how we have been changed by the universe sharing a secret with us." Thank you all very much.
Thank you, David. Very, very good. Very good selection.
Thank
Rabbi,
you.
oh, go ahead, David.
We'll see you next Saturday. Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom,
Shalom.
David. I understand. Take care. Rabbi, hi.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I think what I will do, I'm very glad the rabbi is here because what we're going to be going through for the next few weeks, it has a lot of it has a lot of difficult words to interpret, whether it's in Hebrew or in English. And so we will need the rabbi's services to help guide us through this. Hi, Pastor Bruce. And Grace is on by phone, I guess. I'm going to start off with our opening prayer in English this time. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe. You have sanctified us through your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves in things of Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Well, last week we spoke about
Hi, Grace.
Here's Grace. She's here in person too.
Right.
And last time we spoke a little bit about Jacob, called Israel at this time, bowing to the head of the bed. And he's because he's going to be in the process of dying. And then Joseph, I think did we start off with verse 1? Did we include that last week or not? Verse 1 of chapter 48.
Okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay, that's what I thought. Why don't, if somebody would care to begin reading with Genesis 48, verse 1.
I will as I turn the page. Okie dokie. Oops, I went too far. I got into Exodus. Okay. Sometime afterward, Joseph was told, "Your father is ill." So he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. When Jacob was told, "Your son Joseph has come to see you," Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed.
Okay, let's stop at that point. I think we did cover a little bit of this, but that's okay. Joseph has had the responsibilities of looking over and caring for Egypt, and he's sort of busy. I'm sure he visited with, he may have, it isn't stated here, but he may have visited with his parents. What is your opinion concerning what Ricky just read? Does he have to be told everything before he takes action?
Ooh.
Think of our own experiences. Pastor Bruce, were you ready to say something? Yes, please.
Well, I was just remembering the call about my own parent. I think that's I think that was, I only lived 2.5 hours away. I'm sure Joseph lived a little closer than 2.5 hours away. at least I'm assuming he did. I'm assuming he lived closer than 2.5 hours. But when you get a call like that, you are going to take action. I mean, technically speaking, we had Karen's mother with us when we got that call. She wasn't scheduled to leave until the next day to fly out, and was expecting us to take her to the airport. I mean, there was a lot of logistical details that were tricky when I got that call about my own father. So we really, when you look at this in the whole with all the missing details, we don't, and Joseph was in charge of many things. We don't really know how long it took. And it says sometime afterward. I guess that was the other key phrase. Sometime in there, this is all happening. I started thinking about my own journey and with that call. And it wasn't that I could drop everything right that second and go. I had to just kind of think through every single detail of what we were doing with Karen's mother and this and that, the other thing, and take care of all the details and go. But it was within 24 hours, but it wasn't 2 minutes later. So that's kind of what I was going to say was, as I hear that again, and I think we did actually stop at verse 5 here, but some of us talked about this, but I don't think I shared that because that was something I thought of later, was my own phone call that your father's very ill. So I started thinking about that. So that's what I was thinking about.
I understand. Michael, you've had your hand up, and then Don.
You know, Marty, it also comes to think, since you talked about what do you think about that, maybe in present day, it also can depend on if you're apart, let's say in my case, it depends what kind of relationship you also had with your parents. Not all of it is good. Not all of it is not good, you know. And so there's a dependent over there too. In my case, I was in one state. I was in California. My parents were in Arizona at the time. And so with both cases, my emotions were going wild. Even though we were in separate states, I was very close to my beloved mother and beloved father. We were close in spirit and everything. We were just separate, you know, in geography separated us. So I went a little bit mishiga, you know, because you don't want to hear that with a loving parent, you know, when there's lots of love and affection and respect between all of us. So in my case, I would say it was, I had to get there as quick as I could. And it's frantic. It's just a frantic time.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes, Don.
Yeah, Marty, I had a question about the translation of the word sick, whether how mortal is the illness, you know, is it a kvetch or is it a serious, you know, I don't know what the Hebrew is, the word used.
Okay.
Marty, if I
Rabbi.
may,
Sure.
this is actually the first time in the Torah that someone's described as being ill or sick.
That's right.
So we don't have the context to fully answer Don's question. You know, as compared to someone else, as the as the Hebrew word develops over the centuries, it's more just, you know, like ill, not necessarily terminally ill. There are different rabbinic words that describe a more serious affliction. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even use the word affliction here. In contemporary Hebrew, it's definitely sick or ill, but not necessarily critically ill or terminally ill.
So in this instance, then Joseph was called for without really knowing Jacob was terminal.
Might very well be. I mean, everyone else previous to this, and in most cases in the Torah, is either is struck down, dies as the result of a particular action, or is quote unquote gathered to his or her kin. There's no additional information provided about it. So this is obviously the biblical author was trying to convey something to us about Jacob's condition. We're just not sure what.
Good points.
Could I continue
Yeah.
real quick?
Okay, Don, and then Joanne.
Just real quick, just to relate an incident when my father lapsed into a coma. Was last. I had been his caregiver for 7 years, and I was away, so I had to jump on a plane, and he was still in a coma when I got there. And then 3 days later, my younger son was getting married in Mexico. So I was torn. How long am I going to wait here? Will I miss the wedding? I'd be prepared, but I really don't want to miss it. So I asked all the staff at the facility, asked the rabbi there, and they all said, you have to go where there's life. So after 2 days, almost 3 days, really, I jumped on a plane, went to Mexico, and then it was a week-long affair. So talk about mixed emotions after that.
Yeah, I understand. Yes, Joanne, you had a question or a comment?
Comment more, I think. I'm reading back to chapter 47, and when the time approached for Israel to die. Okay, when I said Israel and reread it, it's like, what? Okay, but he's already said he must have felt ill at that point. We don't know how long it was, 2 years, 3 years, to a month, that he was giving him orders that he wished to die. When he died, where to bury him, etc. So when I was reading this, my first thought was, oh, this is written by a different author somehow. It's almost like they don't quite realize what has occurred before. When I read sometime afterwards, it's like somebody put that in. But that was, I guess, my first feelings were, well, this is confusing to me. So.
Yes, Rabbi.
I just want to throw in again, frequently the English draws us in one direction. Doesn't mean that it's incorrect, okay? But most of us look at that English and see, oh, sometime afterwards. The Hebrew is much more exact. After these things. Happened after these things. So relating us back, as Joanne was talking about, relating us back to chapter 47, but it could have been the next day.
Sure.
Yeah.
The
That's
narrator
right.
or the writer is not necessarily adding a time frame so much as a timeline.
Good.
If that makes sense.
Right.
No, that makes it make more sense
Okay.
to me. I was fighting it, like, what's going on here? And,
Okay, and Grace has been very gracious to us. I know we got it, but she had her hand up for a long time now. I apologize, Grace.
No worries, no worries. I too was thinking the same comment that was just spoken. And I just want to say, my father knew he was leaving planet Earth quite a while before he was there. And he calls me and wanted to know how I was doing. It's like as if he knew I had fallen, fractured both my radius and ulna. I had pins and plates, and I was pretty miserable. And he's like, before he even was aware that that had happened, because I'm in Wyoming and he's in Arizona, he says, you need to come home. I'm 54 years old and you need to come home. And I knew that it was a double-edged sword because, when he was really ill, it was going downhill fast. He was, 81 years old. He'd been sick for years and years and years with Crohn's illness. And so, I started plotting and planning and making preparations to return back to Arizona, where, I later had to bury him. But it wasn't long after I returned. He existed, and I would come and see him several times a week. And just go over and visit, watch NASCAR races with him, watch animal programs, and just anything he wanted. And the night I said goodbye to him, he went into hospice. The night I said goodbye to him, I knew he wasn't going to be there the next morning. It's that emotional. And I think this is all very emotional because the father is saying, I don't want to be buried here. Please take me to my homeland, where I belong, where I belong for my, my burial. And it was forethought because father and son knew. And I think that there may have been some responsibility on Joseph's part, thinking, okay, well, let's see what dad wants. And I know what he wants. And I'd like to make this happen for him, as a ultimate respect for his father's wishes. And that's all. It's really a statement, and just it's pretty clear to me that that's the communication between father and son. And I was my father's final child, and he was around to raise me. My mom was like, I'm done raising kids. I'm over here doing this, and that's just the way it was for me. So I just thought I'd share that with you all, and thank you for letting me get in there.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your insights into this passage. Any other comments? Ricky, you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm thinking, oh, you know me so well. I was thinking that with my father's death, which the specifics aren't important, but prior to his departure, we'd had a phone conversation. He was dating a woman, his lady friend, and he said that he knew I was okay and that she was okay. And it was like my father knew that he had finished everything that he needed to finish and that it was okay to leave. And when the hospital moved him from CCU to a regular room so people could visit and say goodbye, he was gone within 3 hours. It was like, hey, this is my last place. I know Ricky's okay. I know my lady friend is okay. I'm out of here. And so I sort of got that feeling here that Joseph is winding down and making, putting all of his ducks in a row, so to speak. So that's what I got out of this.
Good point. Good points, everyone. Yes, Gail.
I was remembering when my dad died, he had open heart surgery and they weren't able to get his heart going. So he died in surgery. But it wasn't the loss of him that was so hard. The hard part was seeing my mother left behind. The set was broken, and it was that was more difficult than losing dad. It was seeing mother alone and how she was suffering. So
Interesting.
It's different. It's different. So when she died, it was kind of okay because finally, there was no one left to mourn. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yes, Helene.
Well, I was thinking when my dad did, I was talking to him on the phone and he was obviously not talking right and obviously I thought he was having a stroke and flew down there to be with my mother. And my father was a hypochondriac. He wouldn't go into a hospital. He hated hospitals and he couldn't be away from my mother. He was bonded like this. And so my mother and I were going to go to the hospital. We received a call and said, don't go to the hospital, go to the specialist first. And we went. And I still can't believe this. I'm glad to tell you this because it's hard to believe. The specialist was a cancer specialist. And he looked at my mother, my refugee sweet mother, and he said to her, how long has your husband been out of his mind? In front of me, and believe me, I had to help take over because he was obviously going to die of brain cancer. And this was not the way to hear about it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, thank God. I do always thank God, always. Helene had a large yellow pad, the kind that lawyers have, and you know me well enough. I can come on very strong. And I said to him, I let him know that I was taking notes well, he changed his whole attitude. Suddenly we became nice people and he was, and I just thought I'd tell you, so much depends on the doctor's attitude, the environment, the love, the concern. So I just felt I should tell you that story. And it did work out. It worked out because as long as my mother was with my father, he was as happy as a camper. But when he went in the hospital, she didn't go because they wouldn't let her. And he kept running out of his room. He was so bonded to my mother, he
Right.
couldn't be without her. That's why they thought he was out of his mind.
That's
So interpretations.
This brought back some memories. There was a patient I had. She was in a nursing home, and all she kept saying, and it was very difficult to control her, is she kept asking the question, "Where's baby? Where's baby?" And I said to the daughter, I said, "This is a long shot, but why don't you bring in a small doll that she can have and say, 'Here's baby.'"
Good.
The woman just took the doll and treated it as if it was her baby, calmed down and everything. The other doctors wanted to put her on strong sedatives and, restrain her and everything, but she was frantic. And so, and that's all it was just, thinking about an alternative that may or may not work, but here it did work. And the whole family was relieved and everything, but baby was there with her. And to this day, I don't know if she thought it was her own baby or someone else or whatever, but she was at peace. So it's a very simple thing. And so that's part of what we're supposed to do with people who are ill. Right? Yes, Helene.
That was not a simple thing that you did. And I applaud what you did because it's a sensitivity in you that understood. And from what I can tell about you, Marty, I'm me, that you must have had some wonderful early childhood parenting and grandparenting and loving in order
Yes.
to come up with that. Am I right?
Yeah, I agree 100%. To this day, I there are times that we think of this, and this is why this passage I think is very important, because it brings to mind, despite all things that everyone goes through that are, for lack of the proper word, I'm going to say bad events. That it is that if we focus on the good things that we have been given, that have been passed down to us. Sue's father was an atheist, but he knew the Torah inside and out. And he was the most, as I said to her, I said, he was the most religious atheist I ever knew. I have known, I even knew a rabbi who was an atheist. Okay. And so it becomes, it's important to, I think, be sensitive to others. Try to think of ways that they may be trying to communicate. They may not have the right word to express themselves. And sometimes it's the onus is on us to look for those different ways that it may help someone. And sometimes they just want you to be with them, to hold their hand, nothing else. That's right. Yes, Michael. Michael.
Yeah, I'm not muted now.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the study of the Torah, the education of the Torah and practicing of Judaism, I think those are two separate issues.
Explain yourself.
Okay. Now, studying the Torah, the stories in the Torah, can that possibly lead to somebody who does not wanted to respond and see the religious aspect of it? It just kind of, there's a separation there, possibly. Not saying that there is, but people can get the wrong idea about the religious part of it, and then the reading of this of the Torah or the Bible. Can it actually persuade somebody not to believe in the religion in one way or another? It's a little complicated, but that's what I'm kind of getting there.
Okay, that's a good question. Any comments by anyone? Yes, Rabbi.
Two comments. One, back to your original question, Marty, in bringing up this subject, the rabbinic literature in the Talmud, in a phrase that some of you might be familiar with, certainly says in the Mishnah, Talmud Torah keneged kulam, that all of the things that we're supposed to do as Jews, the study of Torah is most important because it leads to all the rest of them. Okay, but then affirming what Michael is saying is that Jewish tradition, and I was asked a couple months ago to find the exact quote, and I've been looking and can't find it, but I'm convinced of the accuracy of the quote, is that anyone who studies Torah without either a commentary or a study partner is worse than an idolater. So in other words, Judaism doesn't say, Jewish tradition doesn't say, go sit and read the Torah by yourself.
Right.
It's always have a partner, whether that partner is a commentator, a commentary, or someone like this discussion that brings out all of the possible nuances and lessons that come from the Torah, not just from the text itself.
Mhm.
So I think that might be what Michael was leading up to, is that someone who is concerned only about the literal meaning of the text might be drawn astray, away from mainstream Jewish values.
That sounds like it should be in the Pirkei Avot.
No, it's not. It's not. It's
Not in the
not.
Pirkei Avot, but it sure sounds like it would
Right.
have been.
It does sound like it could be, but it's not.
Oh, okay.
One of the things there are, in general, there are those that say the glass is half full, and there's the one that says it's half empty. If you look at Torah through the eyes of being half full, you will center on all of the things that are left unanswered. If you look at it from the standpoint that it is half full, you will have a more positive approach to it. You have learned the ability to learn, make comments, listen to other people's comments, and grow. And I think that that's one of the concepts that it's not necessarily spelled out in the Torah itself, but it's the approach one has when you come to it. And I think that's an important aspect of it. Yes, Rabbi.
Oh, I will say this on behalf of everyone who's sitting here and all the thousands of other Torah study classes that are being conducted around the world on Shabbat morning. I've been involved in active study teaching also, but study of Torah now for more than 60 years. And I do not hesitate in saying that every single week that we have this discussion, I still learn something new. I still find something new, a new interpretation, a new way of looking at things or answering things.
Mhm.
It's a good point.
Not put anybody else in the position of having to say the number of years that they've.
That's a good point. Yes, Michael.
To respond to the rabbi, if I may, the Torah is so remarkable the way it's written, because the interpretations, at least for me, are quite difficult to understand most of the time, and that's, in my opinion, why it needs to be read by more than one person. The more, the better, because the interpretations are different among the people who are studying with you, and that's, it's very, it just based on what we just read, just a very few words brings this unbelievable discussion out, and it cannot come out if there's only one reader.
Right.
If there's just one person, that cannot come out. And so it's critical that, and the way it's written demands that. It kind of demands that there's more people involved in reading that individual portion as a group.
Good point. Yes, Don.
Yeah, thank you, Rabbi. I always have to remember that the Torah was composed over hundreds of years with from so many different people and edited by so many different people that it seems to me impossible for one person to gain any perspective without some help. I mean, certainly I need help to get through one verse. I always remember, it was Arnold Toynbee who said about European history, it's just one damn thing after another.
Right.
But and then Marty, thank you for your lovely story about the doll. And at the other end of the emotional spectrum, in my father's last year, I had a devil of a time getting him to settle down in bed every night. And he finally realized he was paranoid about being ripped off while he was asleep. So one day I went down to Ace Hardware and bought a safe with combination lock on it. And, it was about a 30-pound piece of equipment. And I brought it into his bedroom and set it up and went through this elaborate procedure, spinning the combination and opening the door and putting his wallet inside at night and shutting the door and latching it. And he slept like a baby after that.
That's right. It doesn't take much to put people at ease. That's the other thing. One of the things also that it's important, and this comes up from time to time, and I know as we talk about different subjects that are going to come up in Torah, there are two ways of looking at when things go bad for each of us. Some people would say, oh my goodness, I did something wrong. I did this, that, and the other. No, look at it as a learning experience that you can apply to your own life. So when they talk about something bad that somebody did, we look at it as bad today. We can look at it and give us hope that we can change something like that. Whether it's within ourselves or our society, our group. So it gives us hope. And therefore it causes us to look to the future. That's all. It takes us away from looking from at everything with hindsight, but no, it's giving us episodes to learn from, so that we can look to a better future for ourselves, our children, and grandchildren. Yes, Ricky.
Another one of my little mottos in life, when I'm tempted to say, this is happening to me, I change it to this is happening for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that turns the whole situation around. Another blankety blank learning experience or whatever. But to pick up on what Don said, my mother also got very paranoid at the very end. And actually, it was Marlis, came up to visit with me one time. My mother would not drink water because she was convinced people were poisoning her. And Marlis came up with the idea, which worked beautifully, 5 bottles of water and make sure my mother heard us when we broke the seal. That little snap of the seal convinced my mother that nobody had poisoned the water. So therefore, she drank water, which of course we all know is very important because she kept getting UTIs and dehydrated because she wouldn't drink water because they were poisoning her. But just that little thing that I didn't think of, but Marlis did, and I thanked her profusely because it really turned my mother's whole situation around, being able to drink water because of the snap.
That's right. And it's very simple, very simple solution.
Yep.
So yes, Helene.
I hesitate to say it, but I'll say it. Every time something bad happens, or I have failed at achieving a goal of mine, no matter how much it hurts, in my heart, I know there is learning here. I don't think any of us have gotten through life without failure. And what, after you get through the horror of putting yourself back together, to say to yourself, what have I learned from this? Where am I going with this? I think failure in some way is the only way. Certainly children, how do they learn anything without failing? I think we're afraid of failure and not see it as a learning experience.
Very well stated. Very well stated. Any other discussion? Yes, Joanne.
Well, we kind of talked here about people we've loved so dearly that have died in our experience. My mom was in a nursing home for 8 years, and I went every other day to see her. And at the very end, my husband was there for a while, and then he had left. And all of a sudden, my girlfriend showed up, and she had been at church and saying her prayers, and she realized she needed to come to my mom's room. She did not know she was ill. She'd been ill for 8 years, etc. My mother was very not with it, etc. But I even sitting here, I get teary-eyed to realize that the Holy Spirit, something within her knew to come to me and hold my mom's hands with me. So I think there are others around that help us.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's another aspect of this, that deals with having family and friends are important at certain lifetime events. And there's no question. Any other comments? Yes, Michael.
Just one quick thing. If any one of us was studying by themselves, all of this would be missing.
I agree. This is why the rabbi mentioned what he did. It's very important. Marcia, you have your hand on your cheek as if you want to say something or you're thinking
No,
about
I'm
saying
just
something.
listening. It's very good to listen and write things, what I have learned from this. So I sometimes take notes that I can go back to. So sometimes I can't get here. I've been in another world for a while.
This happens.
It's been a wonderful world, but I think that opening yourself to others with your own thoughts, that we do it because we learn from it.
Very good point. Anyone else? Well, it says here that in verse 2, Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. So
Okay, I'm a little lost.
we're
Where are
at
we?
Genesis 48,
48.
verse
That's why
2.
I'm very lost.
Okay. And I think last time we did speak about, people who are very ill and somebody visits, that they were thinking of, the ill person was thinking about it, they come alive all of a sudden. Mm-hmm. And we addressed that a little bit, I think, last time. So if somebody would like to start with verse 3 and begin and take up our reading from verse 3. Go ahead, Ricky.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
okay.
Anybody else want it? Okay.
Okay.
And Jacob said to Joseph, El Shaddai appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me, and he said to me, I will make you fertile and numerous, making of you a community of peoples. And I will assign this land to your offspring to come for an everlasting possession.
Okay, let's stop at this point. Why do you think Jacob is saying this? I'm sure that with all the teachings that Jacob went through, and we've heard something similar to this before. So why wouldn't Jacob have already said it? Why would he be iterating it this time or reiterating it at this time?
Because he's dying.
And so why is he saying it? Okay, he is, yes. So why is it important for him to say it at this time? Yes, Don, and then the rabbi. Okay, it was close, but okay.
Well,
yes,
maybe the rabbi can help me here. I'm a bit confused by that verse because Jacob's in Egypt, and so what he's saying is that God told him he and his survivors will have the land. So but does he really understand that he's in Egypt at that point? Is he that sick, or does he think he's in a different place, or is he really telling Joseph he can have Egypt? I don't quite get that.
Okay. Any other comments, Rabbi?
Let me jump in first with Don's. It's a good, interesting leading question. My first response is that the Hebrew phrase is that Jacob is quoting God, that I will give you this land and to you and your seeds as a eternal possession. When the Hebrew word eretz or aretz is used by itself, it always refers to the promised land. If he was talking about this land as meaning Egypt, it specifically would have said Eretz Mitzrayim, or it would have said Mitzrayim, just Egypt. So for the biblical author or the typical reader, there's no question there that Jacob is confused about where he is. He's quoting this blessing that God gave to him in Luz, in the promised land, and that's this land that he seems to be referring to. Hope that helps a little bit. Back to the initial question, or the first question about it. Why is Jacob giving this bedtime or death moment, pre-death the confession, if you will, or he's going to initiate the promise that he wants from Joseph? I get the feeling that Jacob is not convinced that Joseph is a wholehearted Israelite. And when he, as we're going to encounter, when he says, who are these two boys? I mean, he'd obviously met them before. He recognized them, at least facially, but maybe they're dressed in Egyptian style rather than Israelite style. And he's saying to Joseph, do you really know who these boys are? And so we're going to have this ad hoc ceremony for me to be able to adopt them and claim that they're part of B'nai Israel. They're part of the children of Israel and not pseudo-Egyptian. So I think that's part of the theme of Jacob's comments at this point.
Okay. I'm going to add just one other little bit. This is like the preamble to the Constitution.
Sure.
This is, linking past, present, and future. So now he's saying, look, this is your history. And now we're going to have to move forward. In my way of looking at it, it's easier than it puts others in the proper frame of thought, so that you can then find what comes after. It means more. So I think it's a combination of things, possibly what the rabbi said, plus possibly what I just said. But it's a very important thing to lay the groundwork for an important statement. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. So whether this is just the way it's being introduced or not, from the literary standpoint, this is a good way to do it, to broach the subject that follows. Okay, but we can look at it from many different points of view. So, Ricky, you were reading, if you will want to go on from there.
Sure. Now your two sons who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt shall be mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, no less than Reuben and Simeon. But
Okay,
progeny born
before
to
we
you-
move on, what is he saying with this?
He's made them equal shares, well,
Well, he didn't get to that point.
he's adopting them. I mean, that's
Yes, he's saying that
it shall be mine. Yeah.
anything else come to mind? Yes, Suzanne.
Reuben and Simeon, I believe, were the first and second born.
Yeah.
To Jacob. I forgot his name.
Yes.
Terribly. So, I mean, that's, a pretty high status in the order of family members, the firstborn, and that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Well, it's just, in other words, most people would say, oh, well, the first and firstborn is going to get a double share. Okay, so it cut right into at the beginning of this, Jacob is yet adopting these two boys. But who's being, in this statement, has he said anything else? I mean, this means that you could say, are there 13 tribes, 14 tribes when this happens?
Yeah, he's also at least inferring that Joseph himself is not considered a tribe.
Right. He's been gone for all this time, and living in Egypt, he's adopted Egyptian ways. But Joseph is still a good person and remembers his family and his father. But at the same time, now if we so we recognize this. Now go ahead with and read on, Ricky.
But progeny born to you after them shall be yours. They shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance.
Okay, so what is being said here?
I think he's saying that Joseph is still, partially Egyptian. Anybody, he'll take these two kids, but if you keep having kids, they're Egyptians. They're not Israelites.
Okay. Well, they're right now they're 50-50. Yeah, they're 50% Egyptian and 50% Jewish. So now this has happened. Remember, there have been he has adopted children in an indirect way. When Leah and Rachel could not bear children, he adopted them anyway.
Yeah, but it says here, they shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance. That's confusing because the brothers are Ephraim and Manasseh. So why should they shall be yours? They shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance. So it sounds like he's saying, but if you have two more kids or, any more kids, then they'll replace Ephraim and Manasseh. Do I read that right? I mean, that's what I think I'm reading here.
I'm going to ask the rabbi to, okay, Ruth Ann first, then the rabbi.
Or is he saying that the two oldest are going to inherit from Jacob, but any other children will be inheriting from Joseph?
From Joseph, right.
Okay.
So that those two, I mean, no matter how rich or famous Joseph gets, they shouldn't inherit from him.
Right. Don.
Yeah, this seems to me like a terrific threat to Joseph. It's like you either come back to the tribe or you and your
Yeah.
kids are disinherited after this. I mean, that's a huge threat. And it's kind of sad, it's like all of us, after everything that's happened and how Joseph has really rescued his father and his brothers who were so bad to him. Now it's okay. It's time, do it or get off the pot.
Yeah, here's the framework. If you decide to stay in Egypt, okay, gig is in. That's what you do. But your first two born, they're coming with us. They're going to be identified more with the Israelites than with the Egyptians. End of discussion.
But that was my first impression. But then it says, and they shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance. So it almost sounds
in their inheritance from Joseph.
Joseph, yeah. I mean, but
Right.
how often do the grandchildren really think that they're going to get an inheritance from the grandparents? I mean,
in today's age,
you get your inheritance from your parents. I mean, the
Yeah.
parents pass down to their children, the children pass down to their children. I mean,
Right.
and here's a case where the grandchildren are getting part of the inheritance. So, I mean, I think that's totally different.
As a parent, if you're left out of a will, but your children receive the benefits instead of you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel left out? Or are you so happy that you were thought of in a different way?
I think it probably depends on the circumstances of
this time when we all live so much longer than we used to. We have grandchildren, and some of us, not me yet, have great grandchildren. I know in my case, I'm thinking, my kids, they're already adults, well taken. They've got their own life, they've got their own money, they've done their thing, they're successful or whatever. It's the grandchildren that need the assistance more than my children would. So I think because we live so much longer now, we see our grandchildren, we see our great grandchildren. In these days, I mean, I don't know what the average age was, but maybe you saw, of course, never mind Methuselah and all those and living to 120, but you didn't tend to see the generations past your own immediate generation. So I think at least in my case, I'm more concerned about my granddaughter because my two daughters have established their life and they're set and they're okay. So it's my granddaughter in college and just getting out of college that could use the assistance.
Yeah. I mean, there are different ways of approaching this, and that's one. Any other ideas? Yes, Joanne.
Well, I agree with everything so far, but I think that Jacob is saying your sons, and names them, are to inherit in things in the promised land. It's a whole different thing. In other words, they aren't there. He doesn't know when they'll go back there, etc., other than when he hopes they will take him to bury him. But he's giving them like a roadmap of how he hopes their life will be, and that they will get to the promised land and maybe meet, I'm going to say God, it's El Shaddai. And in other words, he's giving them a look into the spirit that he has guided him all these years. That's what I see in all this. It's not just
Okay.
money and possessions, it's also the holiness of the land and of
All right. Yes, Marcia, very good.
Did you look at the two little comments that were given by two people? I agree with them also. It's another thought.
Yes.
It's another thought.
Very good. Thank you. I was focused on everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you, Grace and Suzanne. Those are very good comments. Yes, Rabbi.
There are alternative texts available to some of the commentators and some of the scholars more than to us. But if I recall correctly, there's one that already identifies, not necessarily by name, but identifies that Joseph has other children. Most likely sons in the way that that from that day and age they reported them, and so that's why not only by name, but Jacob specifically says the two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born before I arrived in Egypt. Okay. Then there are later ones, and so there's the variant text kind of helps differentiate between the older boys, the ones that Jacob is adopting and welcoming into the Israelite set of tribes, as the chat comments were talking about, as opposed to later children who very definitely have, maybe there's probably midrash about it, but had the choice. Which do we want to do? Do we want to follow grandpa, and be the Israelite, or do we want to follow dad and be more of an Egyptian lifestyle? So those texts exist, but they're not the mainstream text of Torah that we see.
Okay. Yes, Don.
Yeah, that one verse to me contains the source of all evil throughout the Torah. It's the divine assignment of land to a genealogy, to a and everything bad follows from that. Wars over territory, wars among tribes, and I'd be interested. I know you mentioned that you know lots of Jewish atheists, and even Rabbi mentioned a atheist rabbi. I wonder how do atheists, and I'm not an atheist, by the way, how do atheists deal with this divine assignment right at the bottom of everything? And how do they even recite the Shema? That's a longer question.
Okay. Those are excellent questions. First, I'm going to let Ruth Ann.
I just have a question because I know I haven't attended. I've missed a whole lot. Are we still in the midst of the famine? Is the famine still? Yes. Okay. So if you look at that we're still in the midst of the famine, how much of it could be that Jacob knows that Pharaoh will never let Joseph go at this point because he's essential to the Egyptian society, and he's looking at like his two older sons as a way of replacing Joseph in the family, because he knows that Joseph will never be able to go, and he's looking towards that the famine's going to be over shortly, hopefully, and the family will be able to go back to the promised land. But Joseph is not going to be able to go because Pharaoh doesn't know what's going to happen next.
Okay, very good point. Very good point. Yes, Suzanne.
It also occurred to me that maybe Jacob is trying to avoid any future jealousies that could go on. So by adopting Joseph's two boys and elevating them and kind of taking Joseph out of the picture a little bit, that would prevent the brothers from doing any harm to Joseph in the future.
Okay, another good point. Yes, Gail.
On the other hand, it might cause issues because Joseph's brother's children, are going to go, wait a minute, why are they so
Yeah,
special?
that's true. Could be. I didn't think of that.
Grandpa adopted them. How about us? So this family is so dysfunctional. It just gets worse and worse. Sorry.
Okay, now I'm just going to toss out one other aspect. And I think, Don, if you think about all of what people have been saying, they may answer your questions. I'm going to throw one extra thing in there. As a grandparent, and you want to say this is who you are to the grandchildren, this is what you have inherited from me and your parents. Would it cross your mind if things could if children could be swayed into thinking that status and wealth is very important, as opposed to saying something about your inheritance from the standpoint of what you believe? We always think of a will. I'll finish up, Marcia, and then we always think of a will in terms of material wealth that's being passed on for certain legal reasons. But do we owe our children and grandchildren something more than that? Marcia, you had your hand up, and I know you put it down, and then Ricky.
Okay. I'm a very blessed person. I have 11 grandchildren. Okay.
I can barely hear you, Marcia. Can you move closer?
Marcia, you have to move closer
I
to the
said,
screen.
I'm very blessed. I have 11 grandchildren at this point. I think that the role I have taken, I think that their parents are the financial support of them. Mine is the support of experiences, support of what my loves are, and to know that there's another person that could affect them. So that's my goal. And maybe it can't be in this case because that person just has had a little time with these two boys, and he knows that he won't have time with all the new ones. So it's a job.
Yes.
It's a job, but
Good
it's a
answer.
wonderful job.
It's
a wonderful job I took. I love it.
Ricky, very good, Marcia.
Bring up the topic of an ethical will, which used to be pretty standard. I have written ethical wills to my children because things that I see in my children that I may have mentioned, but I can't harp on because I don't want to control. I can't control their life. I might think I can, but I can't. I can still say, this I wish you learn, type of thing. And I feel that that's the best thing to give. As I said earlier, my children already are wherever they are financially, and it's not going to change significantly based on what I give. But there are things I want to say, and the ethical will to me is more important than the financial will.
So has Jacob seen something that he needs to take care of before he dies? Does he want to be sure his grandchildren know their heritage from their father's standpoint, not the superficial appearances that they grew up with? Yes, Rabbi. You're muted, Rabbi.
There we go. I'm sorry. There's also the emotional, psychological strain and connection here. And then, in the next several verses, Jacob's going to go back into recalling Rachel. Ephraim and Manasseh are the only grandsons here from Rachel. And some of the commentators go into that connection, that Jacob still feels a little guilt or embarrassment that Rachel, because she's buried on the way at Ephrath and in Bethlehem area, and is not buried and given the same kind of respect that the other matriarchs are, and so that's part of their what we say in Yiddish, that's part of their Yerusha, that's part of their heritage and legacy also, that he wants to connect to them in a special way.
Good point.
As a final gesture of love and respect for Rachel.
Excellent point. Any other ideas? I hope we've answered your questions, Don, all indirectly. Okay. Any other comments before we read on? There's a lot of material that's packed into this. I find it remarkable from the literary standpoint. So yes, Ricky, if you want to read on
I do this because when I was returning from Padam, Rachel died to my sorrow while I was journeying in the land of Canaan, when still some distance short of Ephrath, and I buried her there on the road to Ephrath, now Bethlehem. So
okay, let's any comments here? The rabbi already alluded to this.
Already picked up on the racial aspect.
That's right. Any other comments? Michael, were you thinking about something that?
Yeah, I had my hand up before you started with it, so. But
I'm sorry, I missed it. I
No,
apologize.
no, that's okay. Don't apologize, Mark. It's okay. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I can bring this up, but it's a sidebar, very much a sidebar, going back a little bit. And I wanted to ask everybody this question, if anybody would have any idea, if there was a table of the study of Torah, and it was mixed. How would that? Anybody have any idea how that would go?
It was mixed.
Okay, if you have, let's say this discussion was all rabbis, for example, was all rabbis, and some of the rabbis were Orthodox, and some of the rabbis were Reformed. How would that? Does anybody would have that? Know anything about how that would go? How that discussion would wind up? Or
before I answer, there's only one person with us today that could really answer that. But so I'm going to ask the two ladies that suddenly raised their hands to defer to the rabbi and see if he could answer that, because
I'm more interested in hearing what the lady.
Okay, so I will. Okay, so Gail and then Ricky.
I thought we were are a mixed bunch. I've never been anything else other than that, Michael.
Yeah.
You know, we've got every degree of belief and or lack of, and we've all come from 16, you know, directions. I never thought we were anything. We're not very uniform in any way.
Okay. Okay.
But it could be more uniform if you speak in terms of a traditional interpretation of things, leaving out midrash.
We've been there before.
Versus include, that's right, versus including
I
midrash.
read the Orthodox Bible commentary frequently.
That's right.
And
So, but Michael is saying, suppose it were the rabbis. We're not rabbis. That's why we need to hear from the rabbi. If he's experienced this either as a group of just Reform rabbis or rabbis that had Orthodox backgrounds that also were discussing these subjects. I don't know.
I'm not sure that I can give a comprehensive answer to Michael's question. I have been in situations of very exciting and inspirational situations of studying Torah with Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Reconstructionist, atheist, humanistic rabbis all in the same room. The underlying foundational principle of doing that is the willingness to consider the legitimacy and the authenticity of each of those points of views. Sadly, we don't necessarily have that in the Jewish world. On all across the spectrum, there are Reform rabbis that refuse to listen to Orthodox rabbis. There are Orthodox rabbis that refuse to listen to conservative rabbis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All I can say is that in my personal experience, it does happen when there are respectful and very stimulating discussions across all of the different streams of interpretation. And like Ricky said, I mean, many times I'll reach across on the desk and I'll try to find, because most of the classical commentators, certainly they didn't call themselves Orthodox, they just called themselves Jewish. There really wasn't, there was either traditional or non-traditional,
right.
But most of the ones whom we quote, whether it's Rashi, Maimonides, Sforno, any of even Ezra, all of those we would identify them in the more traditional or Orthodox camp, if you will. But many of us find ourselves looking at the Plaut or looking at Nechama Leibovich or looking at other commentators who would be more in the conservative or Reform camp, if you will. If I may, it occurred to me going back to the question about the boys, the sons, and whatever. There's another interpretation of that one quote that was challenging to us, and that is, we seem to be leading towards that any sons or any children born to Joseph after Jacob's death would follow into Joseph's inheritance, right? But there are also some of the commentators who read into that no, they would fall into Ephraim and Manasseh's inheritances. It just, they wouldn't be listed with their names as full tribal identities. Okay, that they certainly would be included in the Bnei Yisrael, but they would either be in the tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh, and we don't know exactly how that would be divvied up.
That answers my question earlier about they shall be recorded instead of their brothers in their inheritance.
Yes.
Yeah.
That any more children would be in place of Manasseh and Ephraim.
Right. But and then back to Michael's question, if we will, sadly, and I just had this discussion with two colleagues because we're planning a special worship service in the fall for retired rabbis. But we had fond memories of Torah and study sessions and seminars that were sponsored. Some of you might know the United Jewish Appeal.
Yes.
Internationally, especially North America, used to have an adjunct called the Rabbinic Cabinet. And the Rabbinic Cabinet, I participated in that for about 10 years in study seminars, whatever, both in the United States as well as traveling in Europe and visiting communities that we were in. We went to a little shul in Romania that hadn't seen a minyan. They had seen some visiting rabbis, but they hadn't seen a minyan in their synagogue since before World War II. This small little community. And then just one additional story of how, again, respectfully, there can be these opportunities. We were in Istanbul, being introduced to the Jewish community in Turkey, and the chief rabbi of Turkey, of course, was Sephardic, hosted us for a Shabbat lunch after Shabbat morning services at the synagogue, which of course was a Sephardic synagogue, and everyone was participating. But we got to the lunch, and we had this little minhag, a little tradition, is that we would rotate amongst Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, whatever, of who would lead Birkat Hamazon, the prayer after the meals, who would have the opportunity of introducing a guest speaker or a guest teacher or whatever it was. And the coincidence is that the rabbi who, it was the turn of that rabbi to lead Birkat Hamazon at that Shabbat lunch, was a woman conservative rabbi.
You better not be tearing up my sheets.
All right, guys. And so everyone was concerned of what was going to happen with the chief rabbi, obviously Orthodox Sephardic, in Istanbul, if he was going to insist that a man had to lead the prayer, if he was going to walk out, if he was going to be angry, if he was going to be accepting, whatever it was. And he remained at the head table. He wouldn't sing along,
right,
but he remained at the head table, and he wished her well in a traditional rabbi to rabbi blessing after she finished leading the prayers. And when someone asked him, were you comfortable with that? He said, no, it was very uncomfortable for me, but it was necessary. And now, if you will excuse me, I'm going to go into another room and recite my prayers for myself. That was his compromise. But those kind of compromises and respectful acceptance of the reality of our pluralistic Jewish community around the world do exist. So sorry for the long answer in the story, but
that's good. It is good. Marcia, did you have your hand up? No. Okay.
I should
Gail?
keep them in my lap.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was just going to say the pluralism within Judaism is what makes it so interesting and so alive, and you know, the movement. It's just, it's a wonderful thing. It really is. I have to comment, going back several years in our particular little Torah study, there was a brief period of time when, and I'm not going to mention names, but we had someone who had a very orthodox viewpoint and decided to take charge of the class and insisted everything had to be done literally and by the book and by the rabbi, and it was dull as dishwater. It was deadening. It really was. Didn't last too long, but thank goodness. Enough said.
Okay. I think, Joanne, didn't you have your hand up before?
Yeah.
Okay, and then Ricky, Don, did you have your hand up too?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Mine is just recently, the Catholic bishops in America were meeting, and one of the talking points was abortion. And at this point in the Catholic Church, it can't get further apart, I don't think, than that particular. And what they finally did was they tabled it. And I think that was probably an excellent idea.
Well, sometimes it has to come to that. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ricky and then Don. Okay.
The synagogue in Maine that I attended, which is 2 blocks from where I had my property, was Orthodox. And you talked about not having a minyan. Maybe they got a minyan in the summer months when people were there visiting, or for holidays. They literally had to import Jews. We had one kid that was bar mitzvahed, and we had to run around town and find all the Jewish merchants. Come, we need another Jew. We need another Jew, to at least make a minyan for the boys' bar mitzvah. But even though they had it wasn't a big building, so they had the curtain up between the men and the women, and all the Orthodox stuff. But I think that there was a beginning of an acceptance of that there are some Jews that aren't as Orthodox as we are. And so, I mean, I was known as for JFK because my shop closed at 12:30, so I got there for Kiddush. So just for Kiddush, I was JFK. Or when I was there, sometimes they would allow the reading in English rather than in Hebrew. So there was just that little bit. But on any of the holidays, or when the main character that ran it, because we didn't have a rabbi, the main guy got married, oh my God, the black hats came. I mean, I thought I was back in the shtetl, in the 1900s, because it became so super, super old school. And like you said, at those times, there wasn't Orthodox and whatever. It was just, you're a Jew. Anything you read about the shtetl, you're a Jew, period. That's it. And so I liked seeing the slight willingness to, accept me as I am. They did invite me to the sukkah and things like that, which normally they wouldn't have. But it was still, I appreciated it because I got a good education and feeling for being in an Orthodox community, even though there wasn't enough Orthodox Jews to make a minyan. I still felt like I was embedded in an Orthodox community. So, I like that gradation from, and Reform to me seems like so simple, compared to conservative or Orthodox. But that's my own feelings. Right.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Don.
Yeah, it's kind of facetious. I'm just wondering how you transfer that etiquette that the rabbi talked about in Istanbul into the Knesset.
I just wanted to say something. I always like to put a positive spin on things. And maybe the diaspora was not that bad after all, because Jews around the world had to come up with a new interpretation of the new environment that they found themselves in that added a lot of flavoring to our stew. That's all I had to say. Yes, Rabbi.
Okay, three things if I can remember them.
Sure.
First of all, Marty, it's appropriate that you make that kind of a comment because today, tonight, and tomorrow is Tisha B'Av.
Right.
Okay, when we're marking the destruction of the temple. And in earlier, not so much today, but in earlier versions of Reform Judaism, they refused to acknowledge Tisha B'Av as a day of mourning.
That is
Because
correct.
indeed, if it weren't for the destruction of the temple, we wouldn't have the kinds of synagogues and pluralism and whatever that we have today. Okay, so that's number one. Now I'm forgetting. I'm forgetting numbers. number two. I'll go to the three. Okay, if I come back to number two, I will. And this is just a story that that I heard recently from Detroit. True story. A woman Reform rabbi who for a number of years was my assistant rabbi at the temple outside of Detroit. She is now the rabbi of an inner city urban congregation that had an old building from the 1920s that was in disuse, and they've kind of renovated and whatever. They just announced a $4.5 million renovation campaign to completely rebuild in downtown Detroit, which of course has been enjoying a renaissance of rebuilding anyway. One of the first positive, supportive comments and a small check came to my friend and colleague, the woman rabbi who was my assistant, from one of the leading modern Orthodox rabbis based in the Detroit community, but he has an international following. His name is Asher Lopatin. So he wrote, Kol HaKavod, wish you well. Here's $18 check. Here's a supportive, and I look forward to being able to come and pray and study and teach in your building. Okay, to which Ariana Silverman, who the woman rabbi, to which she responded obviously with a thank you, but she said, thank you. My question to you is, will you allow me to come into your building to teach Torah? And here's his honest answer. I'm paraphrasing, but his honest answer was, at this point, you can come into the building to participate in a study session. By the time that your new building has been dedicated and your temple then becomes the seat of religion, Jewish religion in the city of Detroit, I pray that we will have moved that far in the direction of accepting women rabbis, that I can invite you onto the bima to teach Torah to the entire congregation. Now, so in other words, I now remember what my second comment was. The second comment is my conversations over the last 5-6 years with the modern, moderate Orthodox rabbis whom I know and respect would make the statement, and this kind of goes back to what Don was asking also, is that things are closer, more accepting and tolerant between modern Orthodox and conservative and reform than they are between modern Orthodox and the ultra Orthodox.
Correct.
Unfortunately, that has so many voices in the political situation in Israel. They are being pulled farther and farther and farther apart, sadly.
Thank you. Ruth Ann, and then Ricky.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna say to what the rabbi was saying. Yeah, that's the big thing, is teaching from the bima. I mean, having come from Orthodox, and I was Orthodox until my father passed away, and I wanted to be able to say, recite Kaddish, and I couldn't if I stayed Orthodox, so we went to conservative, and then now, I don't know
whatever we are,
already.
right?
We're Green Valley now, okay? But a lot of times I used to think that a lot of the Orthodox were stuck in the Middle Ages, but I really think if it was because of the economic and social and all the the problems in Europe. If the Jews hadn't come from Europe to this country and all of a sudden be able to find out all the different opinions about all the, because I don't think people weren't highly educated back there in Europe and their little shtetl. They didn't travel between shtels. So it wasn't so much, that they knew what all the different rabbis were saying. And all of a sudden, when they come to this country and now they're hearing different opinions, and then with the education of women, okay, you get even more opinions. I mean, that's what led us to being the way we are now. But I mean, if and part of it, like I said, if you look at some of these ultra Orthodox, a lot of it is just, I don't know, just a distribution of jobs within the family and stuff. I mean, a lot of the women there in the Orthodox and the ultra Orthodox really don't look at it as being a burden, okay? Because a lot of them look at it that they are not required to do a lot of the mitzvot. So, it's all on how you look at it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a burden. I mean, especially if a lot of them feel they get Saturday morning off. They're not required to do stuff. Yeah.
Good point.
I wanna-
Marcia, then Michael, and wait a minute. Ricky, Marcia, and Michael, in that order. Yes.
On Tisha B'Av, where I was a resort community by the beach. So Tashlish was really easy because we had the ocean there. But anyway, I had to kind of be conscious of when Tisha B'Av fell in the summer, because so many of the Orthodox would not take vacation until after Tisha B'Av. I mean, we have to get through the days of mourning before we then. So, I mean, that's, today to think about that is like, all right, so you mourn one day. But no, it was, we don't vacation until after Tisha B'Av.
Good point.
I had to make sure I went shopping before Tisha B'Av because the stores were closed.
There you go. And that's right. Marcia.
A little bit of personal history. When my dad died, and he did not have a son, but I felt that it was my obligation to go those 2 mornings a week. And it was a conservative temple, but conservative that the rabbi, the major rabbi at the time, felt that it was wrong that girls could not have Shabbat in the on Saturday morning. It was only Friday night. So he incorporated with these teenagers that I had who really wanted to do more, that on Saturday evening, they could read from the Torah. So I came from a community of mixed feelings. So I went, and they made sure that I had my tleisim on right, yes, I had it on right. I always wore a tallis before or after, because I wove so many of them. They had a feeling for me. And they accepted me. I noticed that when there were just 10 of us, before a certain point, some men did walk out so that they couldn't do some prayers. But it got to a point that they thought, okay, she's okay. And after the service, they would have a little schnapps on the bima, behind, they had some bottles, and they invited me to participate. So culturally, it was one way, but socially, it was another. But I must say, it was a very demanding responsibility, but it's something that I always loved. So sometimes we as individuals have to fight City Hall.
Agree.
But
Michael,
this was a long time ago. Right.
Okay, well, but even so, it's an important story about it. Michael, and then Rabbi.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just asking for some clarification from the rabbi, if I may. what is really this? What is the difference between Orthodox and modern Orthodox?
My term, there's no actual definition. There are a number of different organizations and institutions in Israel. They're political parties that you could say, okay, I affiliate with the Torah or Masorah movement, for example, which would be considered modern Orthodox. There are some Orthodox synagogues these days that are accepting, using the example of what I was talking about before, that are accepting women as teachers to teach Jewish text within the synagogue. I would consider that a modern Orthodox, as opposed to an ultra Orthodox that that would not. I could give other examples too, and perhaps the most important is whether or not I don't know of a single ultra Orthodox rabbi who would consider sitting on a Beit Din, on a judicial court, a rabbinic court for conversion or any other situation with Reform conservative, rabbis on the same court, and even some of the left-wing leaning Orthodox rabbis. There was this thing out of Israel last year where the chief rabbi published a list of approved rabbis who could officiate at weddings or conversions or whatever in Israel, if not even around the world, but certainly in Israel. And there were quite a number of Orthodox rabbis whose names were on that list as not being approved.
So couldn't you possibly say that conservative and modern would be more or less the same? In other words, you have conservative.
No. I'm in the words of those rabbis, they would still consider themselves Orthodox, and having to do with the source of their authority, having to do with acceptance of certain things in halacha, and whatever. They would still insist that there are some lines that they wouldn't cross. For example, that many conservative rabbis don't even like the word conservative. They prefer the word traditional. But that's like Reform rabbis prefer the term progressive, if you will. So one last again frame of reference from the time. I moved to Detroit as a rabbi in 1982. So we're talking 41 years. In the last 41 years, so when I went there, all of the Reform temples, okay, all of the Reform temples, none of the rabbis wore a kippah on the bima, okay, and in one of the two larger Reform congregations, if you walked into the synagogue wearing a kippah, you were told to take it off. That's 1982. Okay. Similarly, in 1982, all of the conservative congregations in Detroit, metropolitan Detroit, except for one, had separate seating for males and females. And like Marcia was talking about, that women were not allowed to have any kind of a bat mitzvah on Shabbat morning, or even come up onto the bima on Shabbat morning. The only time that in a conservative synagogue, 1982, with one exception, in Detroit, the only time a woman came onto the bima on Friday night was to light Shabbat candles, if they did that ceremony in the synagogue. In 2009, 2016, 17, and certainly 2021, every Reformed congregation, the rabbis, all male and female, all wear yarmulkes. They all have Israel flags on the bima, and they all have more than half of their worship is in Hebrew. And in all the conservative congregations, every congregation now is totally equivocal male and female participation. There are just as many female conservative rabbis as there are male conservative rabbis. In Detroit, everyone has mixed seating, and some of the conservative congregations also allow guitars or other musical instruments on the bima during Shabbat worship. So it's not just that it's times, the times they are changing and the definitions of worship, but just as you have that much that's moving in a more, I don't know what the right word would be, more modern, more responsive to what people are asking for, as others have pointed out, there are not quite as many, but there certainly are people who are saying, no, we reject all of that. We're going to move further to the right. We're going to move further to including more of the traditional ultra Orthodox experience in manner of dress, in manner of lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the division is unfortunately getting wider.
Let me ask you this, if I may, Marty, 1 second. Is it possible, and I don't mean this in any derogatory way, not in any shape, way, or form. It was just an observation. Is it possible that because of all of this, when you say it's moving this way, that way, could someone make a case and say it's moving in a disrespectful way? Can someone possibly make a case for that?
Oh, I think the lack of respect is a very important part of the problem. Agreed, absolutely.
Thank you, Rabbi.
I mean, in Judaism, there's long history among the rabbis and long history of disagreeing, and I'm saying this is the right way, this is the wrong way. We've always had that, but for the most part, with some major exceptions, like the traditional reason for Tisha B'Av, when there's sinat chinam, when there's such division and disrespect, if not ultimate hatred between the different communities, then that's what causes the destruction of the temple or destruction of the people.
Okay. Well, this was another lively discussion. Any other comments? Well, it's 11:48 on my computer clock.
Marty, Joanne just put her hand up. I don't know.
Oh, Joanne, yes. Okay, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, here in Dayton, we have the University of Dayton, which is the Marianist organization. And all the priests and brothers are all buried out at Bergamo. And if you die, you are placed in the ground right next to the person that died 3 weeks ago. And there were 2 priests that absolutely wouldn't speak to each other. They even argued to even look at each other. And one died, and don't you know, the next day the other one died and was buried right next to him. So the talk is, are they still quarreling?
But they were resting in peace.
I hope so.
Oh golly, I'm in one way I'm tempted to move on, but in another I would like to. There's so much that we're going to be coming to in verse 8
Really?
that we don't have enough time to discuss this. Okay, so I think and that's just a few words, but there's a lot in here based on our discussions. And so what I think we'll do is we will just this, um, uh, we will pick up with verse 8 next time, so that we can then have as much time as we need to discuss this question. Okay,
Okay.
if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we will, it won't be as complete a discussion as I think is important here. So, any announcements, Ruth Ann?
We've got two big things coming up this week. We have a movie on Wednesday. It's set up for a hybrid. Please, somebody come show up at the temple, because I put through an awful lot of work. I put through about 2 hours getting this set up so that it will go out on Zoom and you can hear it, and you can hear it at the temple. But you know, you might as well come to the temple and see it on the big screen. I mean, it's like you have your choice: the big screen or the little screen. Come to the big screen. What?
Are you bringing the popcorn?
I can bring my popcorn popper. If anybody shows up, we can make popcorn.
Wow.
That's no problem. I have popcorn.
Is that
So-
1 o'clock?
1 o'clock at the temple. So please.
On Wednesday.
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 And I should be there about noon or noonish, just to make sure everything's still working, because
Just be sure you don't make the popcorn until just before the movie starts. Otherwise, Ricky will finish it up.
well, I have the popcorn popper so we can make
Butter and
more.
getting shakers out.
And it's healthy popcorn, hot air popped. And then on Thursday at 10 a.m., the rabbi is going to attempt to finish the discussion on the 10 Commandments. But knowing our group, I'm not optimistic that you're going to finish.
Well, we'll find another time to continue it. That's all right.
It's okay.
So that's going to be on Thursday.
And by the way, that is also going to be one of the discussions we're going to have at the end of our reading of the book of Genesis. So it's going to dovetail into that.
What, the 10
Into
Commandments?
the 10 Commandments?
Yeah.
Okay.
But those are the two biggies. And
Have
like
we
I said,
rescheduled the Sisterhood Shabbat
the
yet?
Sisterhood has not rescheduled.
Okay.
So we'll see. Whatever will happen will happen. But I mean, I can understand their concern, especially with our particular population and the really, really weird weather that we've been having. So, but those are the two biggies. And like I said,
Okay.
we have every Saturday between now and October, we can have Torah studies.
Wow.
Susan,
What's the name of the movie?
what's the name of the movie? Hold on. You're asking me something that I don't have. I've got to look at the calendar. What?
About Jews in the
Somebody have the calendar.
I can look it
Yeah.
up. Program.
That's what I'm looking up on the calendar. Okay, except for the fact that my phone doesn't want to cooperate.
A long journey, the hidden Jews of the Southwest.
Yes.
Right.
Wait,
And it's very interesting.
say it
Like I
again.
said, I've been watching it watching it. So it's very interesting.
Okay, the name kind of got muddled. I couldn't hear it.
Okay, the name of it is Long Journey, comma, the hidden Jews of the Southwest.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's good. I haven't seen it, but we had a trip that we went from the temple, and it was marvelous.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of readings on it too.
So
It'll
Grace,
be a great movie for discussion. Yes.
I expect everybody here to be there in person except for Grace. And Grace, you better be on Zoom to make it worth my effort.
Well, I can't be
We hope to
there.
be there.
I can't be there because we're in the midst. I also lead a philosophy group, and we're in the midst of discussing Viktor Frankl.
Oh,
Man's
Okay.
search for meaning.
Man's search for meaning. And we're now in our 5th week. Okay.
Okay.
And we're only half through, which is great. That's what, there are a lot of different subjects to be covered.